Back again with another episode of the Career Bound podcast. This morning, we're going to talk about how to make wealth and probably go down several different rabbit trails. But most notably, just resurfaced an article from Paul Graham, founder of Y-Combinator. This is an old article. I don't even remember when it was written, probably May 2004. Title is How to Make Wealth, but kind of lays out this proposition of the value of a startup as a way to concentrate sort of your energy, effort, impact all into a short period of your time in your life and career as a way to have sort of this outsized impact on your ability to create wealth over a short period of time rather than, over the course of your career. And a lot of great insights in there. I think we'll break down sort of a lot of the really valuable aspects of thinking about wealth creation through the lens of like starting your own business or working at a startup or whatever. But we'll also explore some other sides of the equation there of, different types of employment, different types of career opportunities. So Cameron, open it up. When we talk about creating wealth, doesn't have to be just in the context of this article, but kick us off with some opening thoughts here.
Yeah, let's kind of go back. Let's riff on the article itself and try to get like a quick overview and summary, and then we can go off into, a few different rabbit holes and such. But so the article is essentially making the argument to choose a startup career path. And it's, essentially making the argument it's better to work on and work in, startups as if you're optimizing for wealth, building wealth in your career, you're going to have more opportunity to do so at a startup that is working on a big, impactful problem with a much smaller team compared to your, traditional large company, large corporate jobs. If you're coming out of college or you're getting your career started, it makes the point like most people coming out of the school kind of life stage of school, they're looking to kind of keep that same lifestyle going. Like in school, we're with a large group of people. We're waking up every day. We're going into the same building and we're surrounded by each other, all throughout, K through 12. And then you repeat that in college. And then once you graduate college, you're looking for a company to join. You're looking for a job that is going to, pay you a certain amount of money for you to show up and do good work. Talks about some of the limiting aspects of, just finding a job at a, reasonably successful, larger company, in terms of building wealth. You're one of, 1,000 or 10,000 or even more. So you kind of, become the average, unless you're in a very specific kind of role where your value creation can be measured. And he gives the examples of being in sales or being a software engineer. Overall, like your ability to, increase your earning potential, is going to be limited somewhat because it's not in such a large group of people. It is very hard to measure what everyone's individual contributions are to the company. And so, using that goes back and makes the argument if you're the ambitious, hardworking type who wants to optimize for, building, a much significant more amount of wealth, you should be focused on startups. We'll get into some of the specific insights here, but just wanted to kind of set the stakes. We're talking about, as a starting point for this conversation, why startups over working at, a larger kind of corporate environment company.
Yep. And kind of before that, I think that there's another foundational insight that kind of gets glossed over in this article. I mean, I don't know how many times I've read this over the years. Every time I feel like there's another takeaway, but buried in the middle of it is Paul kind of breaks down like, what is wealth? It's not money. Money's just a medium of exchange. And he like very succinctly talks about the history of money. But he talks about like the essence of what wealth is. And he gives this example of like, if you've got an old beat up truck in your backyard and just sitting there and, not in use, and you decide to spend the summer storing this car and you fix it up and now it's ready to drive or it's ready to sell, you've created wealth. No one else is poorer as a result of you creating that wealth, of improving something around you. He also talks about like creating software. And I think that this is done. It's not just limited to tech startups, software. This is, people who are actually creating things. And it's not just creating something from scratch. It's you are providing a solution to a problem somebody else has. Like you're creating something that other people want. And that's sort of what he boils it down to, is like that's what wealth creation is you are delivering something that other people want. It's not just businesses making money and then paying their employees. But that's kind of a foundational insight here as you think about like how to make money. It's like, well, what can you do? What can you offer to the world that other people want? And I think that's the first like big pill you have to swallow. And then second, it's a matter of like, how do you go about putting yourself in a position to be the beneficiary of the value that you exchange? So like you kind of go into this negotiation, like you're talking about students coming out of college, joining a company, and they're like, their work effort is averaged with all the other employees of that business who are creating something that somebody else wants. And so that sort of value that gets captured by the business gets defrayed across all these different people that are employees of the business. And some of them may not even be directly connected with the value creation. They may be administrative workers or they're like janitors at the building where the office is. And like, this is where I think a lot of young people, they get frustrated because they just don't understand this. Like school doesn't prepare you to think about this. It doesn't prepare you to think about terms of like, how close are you to the action? How close are you to the actual value creation? How well can you measure your contribution? And how much weight does your individual effort carry, sort of through the whole cycle there? And so this is where I think a lot of young people get frustrated because they're like, I'm working really hard. I feel like I'm doing a lot of work, but, I get paid this for doing this job. Maybe I'm in HR or something, but the salesperson who seems like they're having a lot more fun and maybe they don't work as hard, they get paid a lot more money. It's not just it's not because the world is unfair. It has a lot to do with sort of this idea of not just how wealth is created, but like your ability to measure your contribution and your ability to influence that exchange of value. That's why salespeople make more money, is like, it's very easy to measure the value they're creating for an organization and creating, I say that loosely, like salespeople aren't probably making the products or services, but they're getting other people to purchase the product or service. And it's very easy to measure sort of how much business they're bringing in. So those are a few tangents. There's a lot of other really good stuff in this article that we may get to, but
yeah, another kind of really good insight from the article is how he kind of defines what a company is in this piece. So, I think he pretty much says, instead of thinking about your career trajectory and being strategic with it in terms of like, what is the best job for me to go, try to land and prepare for, essentially in order to create wealth, you have to create something that you have to make things that other people really want. And all a company is a group of people that are coming together to make something that other people want. And so you're creating value and then you're figuring out how to capture that value. So if just from a starting point of thinking about your career, it's like, okay, how can I earn and how can I earn the amount of wealth that I want to specifically build at various stages of my career, instead of just thinking about like what job should I go get. It's starting with that like fundamental question of how can you deliver value to other people instead.
Yeah, and so this is an interesting thing that I think is worth sussing out too. This particular article, it's focused almost exclusively on the financial dimension of wealth. That's sort of the proposition about working at a startup, is that they're basically focused on outsized outcomes in most times. And so like if you give up everything else, all of your free time to pour into solving this problem so that you can scale this solution to a ton of people. Like if you succeed, you're going to have this outsized financial outcome because of the impact you've made. And you made this sort of trade-off. I think it's also important though, and this took me a long time. I didn't think about things like this early on in my career, but life experience and being in different types of businesses at different stages and different scales and working with different people in different types of economic arrangements has given me more perspective on this, is that it's not just about optimizing for wealth creation in the financial sense. There are also all of these other forms of wealth that sort of play into your decision about how you structure your life and career. So I always love to talk about the small business owner, because I feel like the typical small business owner thinks about wealth, whether they define it in these terms or not. They think about wealth in a much more practical way. It's not just, hey, I want to make good money and I want to be financially independent and be able to like provide for my family and like take pride in my work and help customers. But I also want my business to be something that is a direct extension of my values. I want to be able to help people in my community, both through my business and as a byproduct of my business. I want to be able to invest in the people and place where I inhabit. I want to be able to have a high degree of interaction with my customers, where I have that actual tangible sort of closed loop of I'm creating value, but I'm also getting to see the impact of the value that I'm creating, because it's here in the community that I live in. There's all the other extensions of that too, like small business versus startup. Like you have a lot more autonomy. You have probably the ability to go like be present at your kids' baseball games and things like that. Like you have a lot more freedom and flexibility. It's not to say that's not a very challenging thing to run a small business too, but those are on different ends of the continuum, I think, of like the small business owner and the startup wager, like the startup founder, the startup employee, early stage startup employee, especially when you're approaching a startup as a way to make a ton of money in a concentrated period of time. The economics exchange is not just about the money. It's about trading everything else while you're doing that to give you the best shot of having this like outsized financial impact. And that's sort of the part of the proposition he's setting out. And he doesn't spend a ton of time kind of talking about that trade-off in depth, but it's like the people that tend to have those outsized outcomes, they forsake everything else. And then after they, if they are successful, then they have, you have whatever type of opportunities. If you make a ton of money, like you're in a better financial spot. But I think as a lot of young people, they're at the start of their careers. I think a lot of people, that trade-off is not a good proposition. That's not what they're actually after. They do like the idea of having massive impact. They do, a lot of them do like the idea of making a ton of money. And being part of like something that's really challenging and being around competent people, but, and it can be a great thing at the start of your career, but I think a lot of people too, it's like, how do I do all of those things? How do I make decent money longer term? How do I build skills, work around cool people, have an impact, but also I don't forsake all these other aspects of my life that are what I would constitute as non-financial wealth, like my ability to have relationships and invest my time and resources with the people and in the things that I want to, and like not be 100% consumed by my job all of the time just so I can have a financial outcome. Like it's a trade-off, and I'm not condemning one way or the other. I think that sometimes you don't recognize the trade-offs that are actually taking place.
Yeah, I think what the article does well, and you can expand on it, is it sets up this comparison of from a like choosing between a even more like the very traditional go get a stable, steady job inside, a larger corporation, a larger company. And, within that, of course, there's going to be different ranges of, how successful you can be. And he's making he's comparing, all right, like in a stereotypical startup environment, here are the trade-offs associated with those two. And, he makes really good points about like startup offering, like you can create more value, you can be more impactful, you can work with a higher intensity it offers the ability to get the value of working in a large, company, having a 20, 30, 40 year career path in a large company, you can actually capture, the same amount of value in a 3 to 4 year timeline in a startup environment. Yeah. But I think the important thing from the article, and like why I would recommend any, young person starting to think more deeply about their career, like read this article, because it helps you to start assessing career opportunities in a really valuable way. Like there are different kinds of career paths, there are different kinds of work that you can do. And like the career environment you're choosing to put yourself in is like one of the, I would say that is kind of what you're trying to figure out in the first 5 to 10 years of your career, is like, what are the general directions that are going to be good for me? If you do think you're, really, have that stereotypical like millennial and Gen Z desire to like, I want to make a big impact on the world, then, maybe it makes like, I want to be a part of a smaller team with a big mission and, kind of have that like call to adventure, et cetera. Like, yeah, I would like, if that's how you're feeling, like go work for a startup for a couple of years and essentially try it on for yourself and see how it fits you. Of course there's value to be gained from, spending time in a larger company. Maybe that's a good first decision to make, starting your career, because it's going to give you that initial, level of, financial independence. And now you're in a position where, depending on what your risk tolerance is, like it makes like now you have more courage to go, work on a startup. Maybe you're more valuable to a startup's mission because of the skills you've developed there. And then, we've seen, there's a very common kind of trajectory going on right now where the typical kind of like credentialist focused individual goes to school, gets their finance degree, go and works in finance for 3 to 5 years. And, they're like, oh man, I want to go, find a small business that I can, acquire and, totally change the lifestyle of my career choices. Because I realized like I was going to end up miserable for 30 to 40 years working inside a larger company and everything. But I think the big thing is, I think this article gives you, it starts to ask the right questions of how you should make career choices. Whereas through school, most people are taught you need to identify the kind of job that you're going to be a good fit for, and then develop those skills, and then, become qualified for it, and then go land that job. And, that's the end of the story. And, now the next 30 years of your career are kind of laid out for you and stuff. Like there's small business ownership, small business entrepreneurship. There's, kind of playing the startup game. There's going into larger corporate environments. Like there's kind of these bigger career buckets. I think depending on who you are individually, like you can build a lot of wealth for yourself, over a 10, 20, 30-year career working for larger companies. But it's really important for you to understand within that game, within that environment, what are going to be the kinds of roles and opportunities that give you the most leverage. So like, Paul talking about, hey, like salespeople, it's easier to measure their impact. Therefore, you can you have more control over, how much value you can capture depending on your skill set, depending on your work ethic, et cetera. Another good, kind of career path within those larger company environments is like becoming like a top tier, executive or manager, et cetera. Like you are more closely tied to the overall, value creation, value capture of the company in those kinds of positions. But just know, like, there's trade-offs. So like, what does it take to become, a high performing, like enterprise salesperson? And is that going to fit like your personality, your values that you want to live out in your life, et cetera? And, same thing for startups. Paul says it in the article. We would agree, like the vast majority of young professionals are not going to be, typical, like being a career startup professional is not going to be the best thing for most people. It's high intensity. It's, very uncertain outcomes, related to like an individual startup that you're choosing to work on, et cetera. And then same thing with like small business entrepreneurship, like that comes with its own trade-offs, both good and bad. But I think the goal should be, hey, I'm going to spend the first 5 to 10 years of my career gaining experience that leads to the self-knowledge that, I can feel confident that I'm putting myself in the kinds of positions and environments that make sense for me to be, that makes sense for me individually, depending on where I'm at in my, life overall and my career, what my natural strengths are, et cetera. What are going to be the best environments for me to like live out my values and all those things. So I think that should be the first thing before it's like, oh, am I good at sales or marketing? Or, should I have this specific kind of job? Like you should be thinking about what kind of overall kind of like career environment you want to put yourself in.
So there's another insight in here that I want to break down and kind of flows from your last point is he has this bit in here I'm just going to read. It says, startups are not magic. They don't change the laws of wealth creation. They just represent a point on the far end of the curve. There's a conservation law at work here. If you want to make $1 million, you have to endure $1 million worth of pain. One example, to make $1 million, you could work for the post office your whole life, save every penny of your salary, and then, at the end of your life, you've accumulated $1 million, as opposed to this proposition of a startup, like focusing on, compressing all that. What he says is in a startup, you compress all this stress into 3 or 4 years. And so I want to take a sidestep again away from just thinking about this in terms of like purely financial wealth, because I think also the proposition you're making early on in your career, you're taking part in based on like where you choose to start your career, the types of businesses, types of organizations, and the size and scale of those two, is you are making a decision about your own ability to create wealth, your non-financial wealth, like your human capital, your skills, your experience, your earning potential longer term, like your ability to accelerate all of those talents for yourself. Like, for instance, a byproduct of working at a very intense startup early on is that because of that intensity, because of the focus, because of the pace, you're developing skills at a rapid rate. You are being thrown into the deep end and forced to swim over and over and over again. And on the other side of that, whether you succeed financially or not, you have this other thing, which is an asset, your ability to now go operate at a higher level, to be more valuable. You have probably much more impactful skills as a result of that, packing 10 to 20 years of career experience into 3 or 4 years of like really dedicated focus. That's not to say you can't still build those skills, but if you go work at like, say, a nonprofit or like a Fortune, 1,000 company, and you're hired as, like the entry-level marketer, it may take you 15 years and you may never actually, break the ceiling, but it may take you like 15 years to get the same amount of exposure as somebody in a startup gets over 3 to 4 years. And part of the calculus there is, this is true of startups competing in the market too, is like there's something of a first mover advantage. A 25-year-old that has 35 more good years in his or her career and has developed all those skills front loaded has this sort of trajectory opportunity, as opposed to somebody who's, they're now in their 30s and they've spent 10 to 15 years like slowly climbing the ladder, like the way that they've expanded their purview of how the business works is much slower. It's kind of this creeping process. And you get to the end of that, and it's like you've built a career that works best in that environment. And that's probably true of the startup person. Like it's harder to go plug into like a slow moving corporate environment too. Like you're making that trade-off. And I think that's an important thing too, is I do have somewhat of I have a soft spot in my heart because of the values of that startup. But whether you choose a startup or not, I think the point he makes about this conservation law of like, if you want to make $1 million, you have to endure $1 million worth of pain. If you want to build skills that can create $1 million of wealth, you have to endure $1 million worth of pain. Like you have to pay that tuition to build those skills. You can do that in a concentrated time frame. You can do that in an extended time frame. You can do it somewhere in the middle where maybe you're working really, really hard. You've got your moonlighting outside of your day job. You're like always making momentum. And I think that's sort of the thing that people early in their career should not lose sight of, is there is a tremendous advantage to you longer term if you approach the first leg of your career journey as this opportunity to concentrate a ton of pain right up front and just run at full intensity so that you have access to this higher trajectory earlier and faster. Because that's where the power of compounding interest really takes effect. And like, this is, we've seen this with so many of our students and alumni in Praxis too. Like how many of them now are 5, 6, 7 years in their career, they're in their early to mid 20s still, and they've been making great money, and they have this level of autonomy and control over their career, and they're in a good financial spot, as opposed to like the person who they're just getting started at, age 24, 25. Like you're in this, you've accelerated opportunities like 10 years in advance, in many cases, and maybe even farther ahead, depending on the circumstances. But that's kind of the true economic trade-off, I think, when you think about like whether it's startups or not, is like concentrated pain in a short period of time right at the start, as opposed to spreading that out forever.
Yeah. And for those who don't naturally relate to the, using pain as like, this is what you want to optimize for, like it's a stand-in for learning and growth. Like you're trying to fit in as much, as many learning experiences as you possibly can that lead to your, skill level going up, your, not just your skill level on, specific things, but just like if you've been in a startup environment for 3 to 4 years, the chances that you've been exposed to a lot of different, situations with the business where it's like, hey, like things are going really well, therefore we need to increase our intensity to keep up with, the growth that we're we're capturing. There's going to be times where it's like, oh man, like we're not sure if the business is going to be around, after the next 3 to 6 months. Like we could run out of cash. Like, you're gonna see some stuff essentially, and I think that's the major benefit. So for you individually, thinking about what does it look like for me to optimize for the most like learning and growth that I can achieve, through the first 5 years of my career, I would say.
Yeah. So there's another insight. I'm gonna keep pulling stuff because there's another one that I really like too. He's talking about startups again and like building your startup to outpace competitors. I think it's a really apt metaphor as well for a young person early in their career thinking about their ability to win opportunities on the job market or whatever. Is he talks about like anytime you come to a difficult fork in the road about like what the company should do next, or as a young adult, you're like, I have these two opportunities or I have these two interests. Which way should I go? He says, one of the decisions we always made at Y-Com, and the company that they ended up selling, was like, if it was the choice between creating two features that were both, roughly the same ROI per impact or per like effort to create, we would always choose the harder one. And we always talked about this as running up the stairs. And the reason that we talked about that is like, we knew that competitors wouldn't chase us up the stairs. Like if we were doing things that competitors couldn't do, or they wouldn't do, they weren't willing to do, that would allow us to have this sort of escape velocity that we're running at, where we're always able to compete on our own merits. And that gives us sort of this advantage on the market. I think as a young professional, you are on your own journey. Don't look at yourself and compare yourself to how you're doing financially to other people. That's unhealthy. But I do think it is worth, when you're thinking about like, hey, I want to be somebody who can win opportunities, and maybe you have a specific career interest, I think it is worth paying some attention, especially as you get a little bit further along, to how your opportunities and the experiences you get compare to the average person who may be competing against you for the same types of opportunities you want. If you're somebody who's like, yeah, I want to be a VP of a company someday, or I want to be an executive, like, you need to err towards the more impressive side of experiences, but like, not just in terms of like the face value of what those look like, but the things that are going to prepare you with the skills in order to do that job. When you're applying to jobs early in your career, like, it's not just, I think a lot of people overlook this, is it's not just you on your own merits. It's you compared to the next best person in line. When companies are making these hiring decisions. And so when you're thinking early on in your career, you shouldn't just go do stuff that you're not interested in because it's going to make you look better on paper. But I'm saying when there are things that you're interested in and there's an objective you have in mind and you're not sure which route to choose, a good rule of thumb, I think, in taking the metaphor from this article, is like, run upstairs. Choose the ones that is more difficult, the one that is going to force you to grow more, the one that scares you a little bit more, because the growth and the development, the skills you're going to build, the experience you're going to get is likely going to be way more valuable as opposed to the easy route, which is probably what the average person you might be competing on the job market is opting for, is like the easier route. So, and it's not about necessarily competing against other people, but I think it is a useful framework for like thinking about how to navigate those forks in the road professionally.
Yeah, I think, we work with a lot of young people, and they're, at the time where they're choosing between various career opportunities that they could pursue or accept formal job offers for, et cetera. And we're always trying to make sure and kind of be the sounding board for them to be like, hey, like, forget, if the salary is, $5K higher at this, this company versus the other company, let's think through like what what represents the best growth opportunity for you. And I think it comes down to that. And so like going back to what you're saying is like the one that's probably more challenging or not the path of least resistance is there's at least a good indication that usually the ones that seem more challenging or there's something that's, kind of uncertain about it. So it could be like, hey, this company is offering, it's an early stage startup. They're only offering me, $30K starting salary compared to, this other company that's, farther ahead. They're in a more stable position already. They're able to offer me, 40 to 45K starting salary. Of course, it's possible that the company, offering the higher salary is just overall the better opportunity. But I think it's important to make sure that you are thinking about opportunities much deeper below the surface than just like, what's my job title? What's my compensation package? Am I going to be comfortable here, over the next 12 months? Like you're trying to figure out which opportunity is going to lead to, an experience that's going to help you get to where you want to be longer term. Or, and that could mean like you have a specific kind of career path in mind, like, hey, I want to be, VP or an executive at a company someday. Therefore, I need to make sure I get a certain kind of experience. Or it could just be like, I want to have more optionality for myself and I want to be on that kind of, higher growth, career growth rate trajectory.
Yeah. I'll give you a specific example from my career too, because I don't think it's always just as black and white as like, which one of these seems harder. Which one is a little bit more treacherous, if you will, like that's going to be more growth. But so this is early in my career. I was at a company that was growing very well. It was growing very quickly. I felt like I was always punching above my weight class to keep up with the growth of the company and like be able to continue to climb the ladder. And I was starting to get job offers from the outside, from other companies. And this happened, several times where there were cool opportunities that came up that were exciting. And they were like an immediate, probably boost in title. The compensation may or may not have been comparable, but it wasn't something that was like wildly different. And several of those opportunities came up. And even though I was excited, I remember one in particular that I turned down. The deciding factor was the company I was at. I was the youngest person in the room. I was surrounded by a bunch of executives that were 10 to 30 plus years my senior. And I remember, I toiled over that decision for a long time, but that was the thing that ultimately was the deciding factor between going and joining a scrappier, faster moving, earlier stage company, which really excited me. But I was like, I feel like I haven't quite gotten all of the value I can get by being the youngest, dumbest person in the room. And that scares the shit out of me. Like it really did, because I felt every day like I had to prove myself. And I knew that was something where it's like the goalposts are always moving. And that's going to force me on this, like to aim here. Like I need to always be trying to like grow at an accelerated rate. And there's people that are so far ahead of me and I can learn so much more from in a condensed amount of time that scares me. And that's sort of that early, that's what I mean when I say run up the stairs again, is like, sometimes it's a matter of like what you think is going to, forget the financial income, financial impact and all those other things. But like the thing that is going to require the most amount of growth or effort from you, that's what I think is a good, kind of a good litmus test when you've got different opportunities. It's not just excitement. It's not just financial. It's like all things being equal, 2 to 3 years down the road, where are you at as a result of this? Like the endurance test from both of these different scenarios.
Yep. Yeah, it's never simple. Well, sometimes it is clear and obvious what the better opportunity is, but the point is it's usually having to do with non-obvious factors.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. What anything else to touch on before we wrap up?
We will drop the link to this article in the comments below so that you can access it. Definitely recommend reading it. If you enjoy this article, we did an episode recently too about 10 books. We talked about the Almanac of Naval Ravikant, which I think is a great accompaniment to this too. Also talking about how to build wealth in that book, but great article. Definitely a thinker. We'll link to that. And thanks for listening.